session. My name is Rufai Oseni from Arise News Channel in Nigeria, and it promises to be a wonderful conversation and an exhilarating time. Thank you all. Thank you so much for coming promptly. And I can assure you we'll get started with no African time whatsoever. So thank you all. We'll be talking about the geopolitics of food security, securing African agricultural value chains. And 33 African countries import at least 90% of their wheat. Without Russian fertilizers, the continent loses 30% of its crop in 2023. Despite the Moroccan Group OCP's commitments to the continent's entire fertilizer needs, supply disruption, record price hikes are all there this season due to what is happening in Russia and Ukraine. And in all of this, Africa is in a dilemma because we've not been able to develop effectively our value chains, because we've not taken the bull by the horn and we have not taken Africa's future in Africa's hands. And that's what we're here to do today. Just by the show of hands, raise your hands if you truly believe that Africa can have food sustainability. Truly believe. So in this conversation, we are going to tackle that problem and see veritable ways of changing the dynamics. Because yes, it is only a belief. You believe Africa can have food sustainability, but we don't currently have it. And that's the sad reality. So we have some key points in this session. We'll talk about productivity in the first phase, productivity, quality, sustainability, how African rural systems and agricultural systems can be, structured to reach food security and resilience. We'll talk about financing. We'll talk about what IFIs and DFIs are doing to provide solutions in the private sector. Then we talk about strategic stock, collaborations with AFCTA, promoting regional responses to anticipate crisis. That conversation is also going to segue into the climate change conversation that is constantly heralding our lives. We talk a little bit about the role technology plays, value chain across the African continent, and that's why we have people from the logistics team on this panel session, very diverse. We have a finance team and understanding agriculture. So real quickly, some house rules. The panel will share experience with the audience in clarity, not more than 2 minutes. That's an introductory. And they will also interact with the audience. And let's not forget, it's a panel. It has to be interactive as much as possible. And, we have a lot of thoughts that we'll be sharing as regards this. And these panel sessions are unique because at start, we always have an expert advisory on it. And we've got Umid Kaziri, we'll be doing the expert advisory. But on the panel session, real quickly, we've got Philippe Labon, President, AGL, African Global Logistics. Big round of applause for him. Jennifer Ban is the Head of Partnerships of AGRA. Round of applause for Jennifer. Munish Jindal is the CEO in Dorama LMA Fertilizer. Big round of applause. And we have other key people in the conversation, like we'll also be having Omid Kasiri, that will be our expert from McKinsey, and is going to be talking to us about this. Oh, we have, okay, you're not an expert. Okay, good. Okay, from Propaco, okay. Thank you so much, and we'll just go straight to it now. We'll have Omid Kasiri to please come forward and as the expert to come share some insights at this panel session. Omid, big round of applause for him as he comes on stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. Rufai is very kind to call me the expert. I think the real experts are the panelists that we're going to hear from very shortly. I will share some perspectives on food security and put some facts to it so that we're speaking not, around this wonderful two words that have been used quite extensively over the past few years, particularly after we had the crisis in Ukraine. But let's talk about tangibly what exactly is the challenge that's facing us. I'm a partner for McKinsey in Nairobi. I lead our East African practice and our African agriculture practice, and I am a farmer in background. So I think it's very important when we talk about food security, often the picture that comes to mind is, are we producing enough food? That's typically the easy answer we get to. That's not the only issue, and one does need to think about food security quite holistically. And what we've got here are four sort of questions that one needs to answer when looking at food security holistically. Are we producing the right amount of food without disruption over time, with the lowest trade-off to the environment, with the right nutritional quality at an affordable price? We can produce the food, but if it's not at the right price, if it is not consistent, if people are not getting the right amount of nutrition, we do not truly have food security. To contextualize food security, again, there's a range of how food insecure people are. So the green is people who are perfectly fine and getting healthy meals. The yellow is people who are not getting quite the right amount of nutrition. And in red, you are missing meals and quite hungry. Globally, we have about 30% of the population that is not getting quite the right amount of nutrition, but 12% are hungry and missing meals. In Africa, which is the third set of circles, unfortunately, 60 people are not getting sufficient nutrition, but 23% are hungry. That's a quarter of our population. Now, actually, in absolute terms, Asia has more hungry people than Africa does. It's just a smaller percentage of the total. So it's not a uniquely African challenge. Now, what are the biggest drivers of food insecurity in the world? Is it geopolitics or is it climate? In the last year, would love to see a quick show of hands for geopolitics as being the biggest driver of food insecurity. Great. Climate change? Okay. So the specific numbers may not matter, but maybe proportionality. The Ukraine challenge had 31 million tons worth of impact. Climate change, 2 times that. Now that's the downside of climate change. You were actually right, because climate change also makes some parts of the world more productive. But just to say, we are entering an era where the impacts on our production is going to be high and is only going to get worse on both sides, unfortunately. I'm not in the line of predicting what global geopolitics looks like, but my read of the papers does not suggest that things are getting a whole bunch better around the world. And my read on what's happening in the world of climate is also not very positive. So we really are entering a period of great uncertainty and disruption on this topic. Between 2020 and 2030, 11% more food is required. This is not just driven by an increase in population, but also our diets. As people consume more proteins, then our need for agricultural products increases. And so really, if we're going to manage this, it's both a production side and an eating pattern problem that we need to address. Now, we could, in Africa, double or triple our yields. A huge driver of that is around the technology, and by technology I'm talking about seeds primarily, and as well as the fertilization rate. We use about 1/8 the amount of fertilizer than is used in India at the moment, and very little R&D is done to provide us with the right seeds for the continent. But one fact that I would like to debunk is that we have read, I'm sure in many reports, and frankly we've published stuff that says Africa has the biggest amount of land available, unused land for agriculture. Some estimates are between 480 to 800 million hectares. The reality is that is actually not what is available to us on the continent. We probably have between 20 and 30 million hectares when you look at access to markets, if you don't want to destroy forests. And so it's not as big as some people have said, and so focusing on driving productivity on land that we already are using becomes very, very critical. And the issue is obviously one of malnutrition. So globally, 150 million children, that's over a fifth. 1 out of 5 children is stunted. In Kenya, which is where I'm from, 24% of children are stunted. In November last year, the statistics that came out was that 29% of primary school children did not go to school because they were hungry. They had to go and scavenge for food when education is free. But overnutrition is also a challenge, maybe not so much on this continent, and it's not driven just by people eating too much. It's when you don't have the right quality of food and the money to afford healthy meals, so you end up eating sugary junk instead. And so we see 2.2 billion people, that's 40% of all people, are overweight globally. Again, food insecurity is not a black or white thing. We have, if you, for an energy sufficient meal that costs, it's an average number, 79 US cents a day. For a nutrition adequate meal, just over $2 a day. And for a healthy diet, $3.50 a day. Suffice it to say that in Africa, 80% of our population cannot afford a healthy meal. And that really is the bar that our leaders should be working to, is not just the bare minimum of energy sufficiency, but for healthy diets. In closing, a few ideas. This is not exhaustive. On the input side, what do we do about this? On the input side, investment in climate resilient and appropriate seeds, increased fertilization rates, financing of farmer activities towards more regenerative and climate-smart practices. On the production side, significant improvement in extension and education of farmer practices, growing the right things in the right place. Often we grow what our parents grew and their parents grew, and we don't really know why we grew it there. And especially with climate change happening, we need to change what we grow, where we grow, so it adapts to what the climate is looking like. Potentially investing in the next African breadbasket. If you grow a surplus of grain in Malawi and Zambia, you cannot get it out of that region. And so you end up not growing more than is needed within 10% because you end up collapsing your own prices. And so what we need is the investment in the infrastructure to evacuate these 2 other parts of the continent. Investment in supply, in the supply chain and cold storage. 30% of our food is wasted. Waste to waste value change so that we can actually use the waste and generate revenue from it. And then there's some non-agricultural things we can do to improve food security. Trade deals. I don't think Singapore grows very much, but it's fine on food security. Cash transfers for those 24% of the population that has no money and no food. Sometimes that's the best way to feed hungry people, is give them the money to spend. School feeding programs, something very dear to my heart. I gave you some numbers on the impacts in Kenya. So I hope that just frames the conversation for our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A big, big round of applause for him. Thank you so much, Omid, there. And that pretty much frames the conversation. Now we know the problem. Pretty much reminds you of the nursery rhyme of some have food they cannot eat, and some can eat but have no food. Pretty much that's the case. we have people obese, we have people underweight. But the topical issue here is the fact that a lot of people cannot get access to food, and we can't even store, and in the end, we cannot even afford it because of the economic conditions. So we have a pop period of conversations and things to talk about. But before I proceed, I'd like to introduce Francois Lombard once again, Managing Director of Propaco. Thank you so much for being here. And Sergio Pimenta, Vice President for Africa, IFC. Thank you so much for being here. So we'll just So we just notify you guys once again that we'll be having the session. It's going to be spread across, three key topical issues. We're going to be talking about financing, the strategic stock, and productivity in general. And each section will entail a 17 minutes conversation each. So in about 50 minutes time, we should be done from here. So let's go straight to it right about now and pretty much kick off the conversation on the heels of what was talked about. For all of this, for us to be able to take food from one part to another, we need logistics in the first place to be able to transport food. And currently, we have over 50% post-harvest losses on the African continent. Foods are highly perishable. There's a need for cold chain infrastructure. How can we upscale the sector? And I want African Government Logistics Rep to be able to talk to us about this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So obviously, logistics is key as far as agriculture is concerned. For one main reason, producers are not located where are the main consumers. You raise a figure, and in fact, there are three figures. I have your figures, sir, your figures about post-harvest loss. Your figures is 50. Your figure is 30, mine is 40. So, anyhow, it means there are huge losses. And obviously the key is to bring storage close to farms for many reasons. One of the reasons is that if you store in the big cities, you store carbon, you stock the cost of transportation. So first, you should develop storage facility close to farms. For this reason, cost. The other reason is most of the food is perishable. So you need to store it as quick as possible. We believe it should be done for perishable between 1 day to 2 days. So you should develop storage facility and you should develop cool storage facilities in order to cool down carefully these goods close to farms. To cut a long story short, if we would be able to reduce by 2 the losses of post-harvest, you will increase easily by 20% the productivity of your agriculture, though it's really key. I would say that another driver for the efficiency of logistics is multimodal. Multimodal because you could use the same means to transport farms inputs such as fertilizers, insecticides, and so on, and then export the goods with the same means. So it's key for the future to develop these intermodal facilities and bring the equipment close to the farms. So it means that you need to build additional premises close to the farms. Obviously, but you said, and you began by these facilities, you need roads and you need railroads. And these are beyond the mean of private sectors. So I would say, again, it's true, private sectors has a key role to play in logistics, but it can be achieved without a strong investment by public and by DFI.
Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate you. I'll come to you, Monish, and a very vital ingredient in all of this to be able to crystallize food itself and get it out of the ground is fertilizer. You've been able to turn around a plant. Yeah, you could pick up a microphone. You've been able to turn around a plant that was not doing well in Nigeria, and it's a thing of legend. 7 years ago, you've kicked off the production line and you're churning out fertilizer. How were you able to ensure, one, very cost-effective operation capacity for your plants, two, optimal production of fertilizer? You do well over 2 million tons. And how are you able, to maintain this productive value chain?
Thank you very much. And this today's session, food security for Africa, I think is the most important topic for this decade. And your starting opening statement, if Africa can, it can. But the question is, will it? So there's a lot of change which has to happen the way the governments act today in terms of supporting the agri and food chain. We play our bit in terms of producing fertilizer for Africa, not only for Africa, but creating a value for gas, which is abundantly available in Nigeria, in some of other African countries, which have been trying very hard to translate that into a better economic value. And more importantly, we believe the fertilizer is something which will not only create value for the gas, but it also plays a very important role in creating a food security for Africa as a whole. We came to Nigeria in 2006 by taking over a sick petrochemical plant. We were able to turn around the plant very successfully in a short period of time. However, looking to good level of hydrocarbon resources, which are not translated into high-value product, we conceived to set up a fertilizer project in Nigeria, which was actually very well supported by IFC, the Vice President sitting here, as well as by Propalco to fund the project, and most of the DFIs from Europe participated and supported the project. Two things. One, it eliminated CO2 by eliminating the gas flaring in Nigeria, or reducing it to a certain extent. And also, it was a very vital product for not only adding jobs, etc., but creating a provision of a fertilizer for the African continent. Thereby, we were well supported by Nigerian policies. The two policies the Nigerian government brought at that time. One, it made the gas available at a priority for the gas-based industries, which can transform the product, either fertilizers or for raw material to kickstart the industrial revolution. Second, it also deregulated its fertilizer industry, so which opened up the market in a big way, that when the market was regulated, supported by the model, standard model, which is applied in most of the developing countries today, by providing subsidies or subsidized fertilizer to the masses, Nigeria withdrew fertilizer subsidy totally. In 2015, Nigeria consumed only 0.5 to 0.6 million tons of total fertilizers in all three forms. And by 2021, before we had a Ukraine fiasco, it reached a total consumption of 1.8 million tons of fertilizers in the country. That's 200% growth in a short span of just 6 years. And this is what two policy initiatives can transform the country in a very, very short time. And we see recently, Ghana has followed example, whereby it has removed the government intervention in the availability of fertilizers. And we have seen a lot of international players, both in terms of producers as well as distributors, are rushing to Ghana to play an important role in the market. And we believe that it's very, very important that the African government, which are very short on budget funds, rather than putting money every year into providing subsidized fertilizers, they should rather focus more on creating a long-term infrastructure as well as value, either through ensuring the irrigation and water is available to the land. As a colleague and friend said, the land is not unlimited. The only solution is to improve the productivity. The productivity can be improved by increasing efficiency, as well as getting at least 2 crops out of the land, same land, to double our production, what we are doing today. And second most important, I believe the research on the R&D facility, government should focus more on ensuring the climate resistance and the seeds which are more localized with respect to more localized crops which provide high level of nutrition rather than just following a word example of producing more rice or wheat. There are so many local crops which provide better nutrient, better protein compared to rice and wheat. So we believe that's where the government should spend their money and efforts rather than putting every year big bill on the fertilizer subsidies. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. And that's a very powerful story told there because, I mean, if you know the work of transformation that was done with LMA, I mean, it's stuff of legends, I should say. I mean, the plant was more than sick. It was dead before you guys resuscitated it. Jennifer, I'll come to you. I know you want to share some insights as regards, working with farmers, as regards, increasing productivity in the sector, as regards harnessing potential. I mean, what would you like to say as regards that?
Thank you very much for that. It's quite interesting, listening to what Omid was presenting in terms of just the scale of both the opportunity and the challenges that we're facing. I think it's very clear that we will have to do things very differently as we're moving forward. Whatever we've been doing that has been working well, we have to intensify it, we have to invest a lot more, we have to scale it, we have to replicate it across Africa. So a couple of things. We as AGRA work across food systems because we also believe that if we want to address the challenge and the opportunity of food systems transformation in Africa, we have to take a food systems approach where all of the different interventions are happening in parallel. But we will have to work in partnership. I would love to partner with you, Manish, to scale the innovation that you actually brought to the market. And what are some of the things that we do? We work with 11 million farmers, close to 11 million farmers across 15 countries in Africa. And we build farmer clusters, we consolidate them, we work on the last mile delivery towards farmers by ensuring that there are agro-dealer networks and village-based advisory networks. And we partner with many of you to ensure that we provide technology, being it seeds, other inputs, mechanization, extension services to farmers, but we also work on the output market to connect them to markets. Now, why is that so critical? We have to address a lot of the risk and the volatility that are in our value chains. We have to ensure that new innovation and technology is being introduced. And we have to build inclusive business models and value chain models. As AGRA, we have partnered, for example, I see Africa Improved Foods, to address aflatoxin in their value chain so they could increase their local sourcing in Rwanda. We've worked with John Deere. We've worked with one of the largest off-takers in Ghana to basically quadruple their maize sourcing that they were doing in Ghana. But a lot of that we're doing is not sufficient. And we are actually open, willing, and in the coming 5 years, we'll intensify and scale many of the partnerships that we've built with you. Because we shouldn't only reach only 8 million farmers, we have to almost double it. And we need to create jobs along the value chain. So there's a couple of things that we also do, in addition to working with farmers, because we do realize you need to create that entire enabling environment. We also work on inclusive finance models, building blended finance facilities with local financial institutions and other international financial institutions to also make sure that the value chains models that we're introducing also have access to finance models. Not just for farmers, but also for SMEs. But because the other end of the coin in terms of transforming our food systems are the investments that we're actually placing into agripreneurs. And for me, one critical catalyst and trigger, if I can introduce, is also digital systems and digitizing actually agriculture value chains. And for that, there are really two levels in terms of how we should be approaching the type of innovation. We have to work on a value chain and a farm level in terms of the type of applications and innovations and technology that we make available. But we also have to look at the broader enabling environment. What is the digital infrastructure in particular regions, countries? How do we work with governments to address the big data questions? So for us, it's really from a few levels. It's really concentrating on the formal level, building inclusive business models, but also looking at the whole enabling environment in which a value chain is embedded.
I mean, thank you so much for that. And that's a whole lot of work because we cannot do anything without building an ecosystem. And you see, the champions of the ecosystems are the ones doing a lot of work, you know, in collaboration with other people. And speaking of that ecosystem, I'm coming to you, Madame, you know, because I want you just to take me on a journey of, you know, what Propaco has been doing as regards ensuring productivity, sustainability, and those specific things you've invested in, those projects you've taken on. I know both of you do almost the same thing, so it's going to be things unique to Propaco and things also unique to IFC. Yes.
Thank you, sorry. Thank you very much, and thank you for asking this question about productivity and quality before coming to financing, which is also a critical question, but and I mean, DFIs are usually more expected about financing, and I'd like the idea to focus first on productivity and quality because it is critical. Why? Because if we want the growth of agriculture and the agribusiness to be a powerful driver for reducing poverty, inequality, increasing food security, we have to focus on strengthening sustainable value chains. It is really critical. So for that, I mean, it's a broader question, and to a certain extent it is a more complex question than only focusing on financing. Why? Because it requires a more coordinated and holistic approach of the issue of food security, requiring to have the global picture across all stages, from providing, giving access to inputs, fertilizers, seeds, giving access to information, technology, of course giving access to financing, but also improving the local production and processing capacities, and also the storage capacities, as it has been pointed out earlier. So, and of course, working on all that range of issues at the same time, to a certain extent, it is not an easy question, but it is the one we have to address as a development finance institution. So we are trying to do that with both our mother companies, the French Development Agency and the IFC. Concretely, we have worked with IFC on the maize value chain recently. We have conducted a market study on the maize value chain in Burkina Faso, with clear objective in mind. First, improving the quality of jobs and incomes for our small farmers. Then improving the overall market infrastructure. And third is of course improving access to financing and insurance services. So these market studies has led to conclusions around 5 priority areas, and some of them are more private sector oriented. So Propaco, which is the private sector subsidiary of the French Development Agency, will focus on them. I mean, so improving access to fertilizers and seeds, of course, improving access to financial insurance services, and strengthening local production and processing capacities. Some are more public-oriented, and so the mother company will focus on them. Among them, strengthening access to information, which is key regarding agriculture and agribusiness, and of course working closely with public authorities to have a sectoral approach on the agricultural sector. So we are working on that. We hope it can be replicated on other geographies and also on other sectors. I really want to insist on, of course, we have to do that. This is our jobs as a development finance institutions, but let's not believe that financing agriculture and agribusiness is also an easy area to be financed. Why? Because we have to tackle with a lot of environmental and social risks on that sector. Among them, deforestation, which is of course critical in terms of increasing greenhouse gas emissions, and also, it can imply irreversible loss of biodiversity. We have to face with land tenure issues, which are very complicated issues also to be tackled with. So this is not an area easy to be financed. And so my conclusion will be that given that context, partnership is really the key word for me. Partnership with our clients, because it requires a lot of resources, a lot of human resources, a lot of willingness from our clients to go that direction. Partnership with other DFIs, like IFC, of course, that we very much value, of course, and partnership with public authorities. It cannot be only a private sector issue.
Thank you so much. And that collaboration is key. I'll come to you, Sergio, just like the collaboration you had to be able to facilitate Munish's plans, and the work you did, and the fact that uptake of fertilizer has increased tremendously in Nigeria. You want to tell all the stories like that as regards how, IFC has been able to help bolster productivity in the agricultural value chain?
Sure. It's a great honor to be here with all of you,
Yeah.
distinguished panelists, and thank you very much, Munish, for the remarks you made about our collaboration together with Proparco, other DFIs, when we supported you from the start of this operation, brilliant operation that you have in Port Harcourt. I agree with you. It's a really impressive one to visit and to see in an area that needs employment, that needs a lot of development of economic activities, to see you come in and do what you did. And I think on the IFC side, the partnership we had with you is, I think, a good example of the type of operations that we can do in Africa, bringing in a great partner, like Indorama in this case, brings a lot of expertise, a lot of best practice, knowledge, and so on, but then also help you a lot beyond just the project itself, right? And one of the components, for instance, of the work we've done with Indorama has been to support their programs to educate the farmers in Nigeria on how to use fertilizer, how to expand the use of fertilizer. I think we all know that the use of fertilizer in Nigeria, like in the rest of Africa, is still way below international average, is still below the African Union goal of 50 kilos per hectare. So we need to educate, help the farmers understand better how to use fertilizers in an environmentally friendly way, in an optimal way, but also help them have access to it. And access starts by the production. That's why you are there. But also the finance, so that they can have access to finance. And on that dimension, one of the things we've been doing has been partnering with companies who specialize on agri-finance through new technologies, through mobiles, through different devices that can give a better access for farmers to inputs, to fertilizers. I mean, IFC has been very active in the overall agribusiness, agricultural sector in Africa. I believe we are the largest DFI in Africa, with about $700 million portfolio, with many relatively small operations with a lot of impact in countries, because very targeted operations helping value chain by value chain develop those value chains across the markets. And the approach we have is really to look in a given country, what are the value chains that need support, and what are the gaps in this value chain, or the weaknesses, the constraints, and try to address them. And we realize they're not always the same. I mean, we've got great partners. I mean, whether it's on the logistics sector, whether it's on the fertilizer sector, whether it's working with farmers, to try and identify what are the areas where we can have the biggest impact, right? So we do that crop by crop, as I was saying. I mean, here in Côte d'Ivoire, we worked in cocoa, we've worked in cashew nuts, we worked in different commodities, and help develop the value chain, looking at the angle of employment, because we all know agriculture is the sector that employs the largest number of Africans, particularly women, but a very large part of the population in Africa depends on that sector. So working on that aspect is important. And we really also try to optimize, maximize the value addition in the region and in the country, right? So looking at food transformation, I mean, I really like what Philippe was saying at the beginning, that if you want to have less impact on the environment, you do need to have as close to the source as possible, the storage, the starting of the transformation. So that's when the analysis of the value chain really makes a difference. Where do you really put your effort so that you have the biggest impact and you can support the most? So that's very much the type of approach that we've been having.
All right, thank you so much. Let me just stick with two of you, because the next key point we're going to be talking about is financing. And I want you, Francois, to talk to me about the role of fiscal and financial infrastructure. You know, how to build that fiscal and financial infrastructure and all of this, the financing and the interagency work you've been doing as regards building this infrastructure. And I will also come to you to talk a little bit about that as we start this financing segment of this conversation.
Thank you. And yes, as you have pointed out earlier, the financing gap is huge. We know that. And the development finance institutions probably, I mean, have a critical role to play to help reducing this financing gap. The natural trend, of course, is more an increase given the growth of the population. So we have to be prepared for that and to do more on that segment. I think that reducing the financing gap means two things, basically. Probably increasing the financing of players that have already a good footprint and that can be or are already regional champions and that want to scale up their action and their activity in that sector. And on the other side, it means, of course, to also provide financing, access to finance for small farmers, for micro and small enterprises. And those SMEs, those small farmers, are too often perceived as the riskiest in a risk perspective, in a credit risk, perspective, because they are small and because they are working upstream on the production segment. So they have, of course, they face a lot of difficulties to have access to finance. So this is the role of DFIs to be there. And to do that, we are providing a large range of financing tools, going from long-term loans to sometimes equity stakes, to guarantees, risk-sharing mechanisms, and also technical assistance. But I want to insist on what we are trying, on what we are doing with financial institutions and so with financial intermediaries. But because this is the only way to scale up our actions to improve access to finance to small farmers in MSMEs. So we are doing that with microfinance institutions like ASEP in Cameroon, Advanced in Côte d'Ivoire, or Cofina, or Access Bank in Madagascar, so that are able to provide very small loans from $500 to $5,000 to those farmers. We are also doing that with local and regional banks, like First Rand in South Africa, EcoBank in West Africa, CRDB, for instance, in Tanzania and Uganda. Those banks have already a very strong, powerful, impact-driven strategy and have a very large exposure and footprint on the agricultural sectors. So they know the markets, they know the players, they know the risk, and we have to help them to go further. And they really want to go that direction. And last but not least, we have to provide, as DFIs, more, I think, technical assistance. We are doing that at Proparco with what we call our ProPulse technical assistance offer. So basically, we can provide some technical assistance to increase the resilience of those MSMEs, to improve their performance, and to help them adapt to climate change. To take a few examples and to be more concrete, it means, for instance, financing action plan to drive water savings when it comes to irrigation. It means to also finance some strengthening of capacities in terms of human resources also, and action plans on climate fighting and adaptation. So it is very, very, very concrete. Proparco, over the past 10 years, has been a constant supporter of private sector in the agricultural and agribusiness sectors, providing around 1.6 billion euros of financing over the last 10 years. And we intend to strengthen this action. But I think the game changer is really what I have mentioned before. I mean, not only focusing on transactions, but really having a more holistic approach of food security and what we are trying to do to step up our action on the agriculture sector and agribusiness.
Thank you so much for that. I know you have very peculiar experiences, Sergio. You can pick up your mic that you'll love to share. And, you know, do you have challenges? Has it been, you know, forming a symbiotic relationship to be able to, you know, finance projects across the African continent with farmers? You know, have you been able to tie your vision around what the African farmers want and understanding their needs as regards financing?
Thank you. Look, I think first on the challenges to finance this sector, I think the challenge that DFIs have been facing for a while has been, you know, how you access these farmers, right? Because it's always been about small companies, individuals that need funding for their seeds, for their fertilizer, their inputs, that are very scattered and that very often are disconnected from the formal economy. With the evolution of technology over the last few years, I think it has given us an opportunity to all of us to really rethink our model and to launch a number of initiatives that have actually allowed us to access these underserved or unserved populations in terms of access to financing. And I mean, Proparco has done some remarkable things on that space. I think we've all worked on such initiatives where we work with a particular ag-tech type of company and then help that through them or with them access financing for farmers. I'll give you a recent example. We just signed a few months ago an initiative with a company in Senegal called Accelerant. And what they do is that they use technology. They do collect data. They also do surveys with GPS surveys of land and so on. So that allows them to have a much better granular knowledge of what the farmers are doing in the remote parts of Senegal. And that knowledge allows to map the risk, to say, well, you know, this activities here, actually, these farmers need financing and they have the right business model to do it. And then they work with financial institutions, with banks, and help them channel financing for these type of farmers. So we've been supporting them. We've provided the financing for this company, and it's been proven very successful to increase the reach that farmers can have to financing, right? So with the development of technology, I think it gives us all an opportunity to rethink how we can go much further in terms of supporting the development of the sector. I fully agree, I always agree with Françoise, and I fully agree today with the comment you're making about the capacity building and technical assistance. I think when we work on the development of an agricultural value chain, we very quickly identify that there are some gaps in terms of knowledge. We were talking about usage of fertilizers earlier, but it can be on many other accounts, right? And so we've been really pushing for that. IFC, in our agri team, we have actually, it's the largest advisory team we have in IFC in Africa, focusing on one sector. It's on the agricultural space, right? And we've been deploying it throughout the continent and complementing this with our investment work. I think we can have a much bigger impact and help more by putting all these tools together at the same time.
Very well said. Jennifer, the question next is to you. How can Proparco and IFC meet your farmers?
Very good question. And I would actually like to start with how can you reach our SMEs, right? Because our SMEs are the connectors and the nodes in the value chains that also help to aggregate our farmers. Now at AGRA and the HRF, in the past 4 years, we have mobilized an investment pipeline of over 800 SME companies across Africa. Because we were accused 4 years ago there's no pipeline, so we said, okay, we'll create it. But we realized a couple of things. One, we have to invest in investment readiness for our SMEs. Number two, we have to provide more seed capital for startup companies and also have a better match with the demand that there is for smaller amounts of funding. So number one, what I would love to explore with Francois and with you, Sergio, is how can we actually leverage the whole pipeline of opportunities that we've already created of these SMEs. Very happy to work with you in specific value chains and help unlock those opportunities.
Very good.
How can you reach our farmers? By working with many of the private sector actors that we're already working with in terms of enhancing their models and further investing in their expansion. Like we're working with a lot of private sector actors who would like to replicate their models and expand to other regions. We will follow them as partners to help consolidate their value chains. So that already helps to address some risk. Secondly, and this is lastly, we also have the expertise and capacity to design blended finance facilities. And we also have built the expertise to help break it down and translate it so that it's more impactful in value chains, because that's also often a challenge. These facilities are there, but they're not accessible. The beneficiaries don't know about them. There are all kinds of hurdles to access them. We can partner actually to make them a lot more useful.
You know the good thing about Africa CEOs Forum? We do deals here, isn't it? So after this, Jennifer, you need to have these people in your corner, have a meeting with them. Let's do deals. This time next year when we come for the next edition, we want to have at least 20 SMEs through this collaboration. Is it possible? Is it possible? It's done. Deal's done. Yes, we can. Good.
If you don't mind, I think Jennifer, Françoise, and I, we're going to leave the panel because we have a discussion.
Okay, very good. Very good. But just stay a little bit.
You know, beyond what you're saying, you know, this is the type of ideas of what we can support. And we have both Proparco and IFC are part of an Alliance for Entrepreneurship for Africa that was launched last year. And through that, we channeling funding exactly for that, to try and finance SMEs. And it's really, I mean, I'm sure many friends here in the room that have been in the development space for many years, this is something that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have the technology to do it. Today we have it.
Yes.
So we have no excuse not to do it.
Thank you.
So
Thank you so much.
talk after the panel.
So afterwards they're going to meet. Let me come to you, Munish. Munish, you have a very interesting story. Can you tell us, how did you finance your ammonia project?
Thank you for coming back for funding. That's very, very important and very critical. First of all, you have to have a right business model. If the business model is not sustainable on its own economics, you can't fund it. Even equity investor will not be confident of investing in the project. Second, you have to test the ecosystem where you are hosted, especially the regulatory environment which you are subject to. If there is a sustainable free market economy, both for your input products as well as for your output products, yes, you can attract the investment. And with this, as I said earlier, the Nigerian government played an important role. They made the gas available for the strategic industry section at a very, very attractive prices, which made us today the world's lowest cost of urea producer anywhere in the world.
Wow. 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 While you said that, I feel so proud to be a Nigerian. Please put your hands together. Put your hands together. Put your hands together for Nigeria.
And it is
Nigeria.
And it is happening right here in Africa. It's very rare to see in Africa, you see the lowest cost producer being on a sustainable basis. The result of that, we doubled our capacity while coming up with first plant in 2016. We doubled to 2.8 million in 2021, right in the midst of COVID and when Ukraine war was on. And with IFC's support and lead, and of course Proparco is also participating in that, we are further starting the construction on third line, which will take our production capacity to 4.2 million tons by the year 2026.
Wow.
Not only that, with this policy, Dangote Fertilizer, which is also a leading conglomerate in African region, they also invested in 2 lines of fertilizer. So in addition to that, there's another investor who's currently working on another 2 lines of urea fertilizer. What it means, in another 4 to 5 years of time, Nigeria may become the world's largest urea exporter.
Wow. Wow.
But
wow.
More importantly, we'll be more happy if the African continent can consume all of that urea in-house. That will be greater value and creating a food security whole of Africa for that matter.
Wow.
Thank you.
Somebody hold me, I'm losing my mind. That's some good news, isn't it? It is possible, and only to think, and that's why, please, let's interact. Let's do business across Africa. Come to Nigeria. Come do business with us. Only to think that about 10, 20 years ago, we had no urea ecosystem.
No, we're importing.
We pretty much were importing, and now we're becoming a net exporter. And that's the power of the prospect.
There was a zero urea production in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow, that's amazing stuff.
Just like by 2015, 8 years back.
Wow. Philip, let me come to you. A couple of things. What can funding, do for your business that'll bring about that, food sustainability and the conversation of geosecurity of food on the African continent? And before we came in here, I want to strike another deal. I'm a deal man. You and Munish were talking. Why are you and Munish not working together here? How come both of you work together?
No, I guess we could work together with Amish, but as I told you, Amish, as he told us, is mainly exporting its urea outside of Africa. I guess it's 90% of its production, which is shipped abroad. No?
Can you take the microphone, please?
60 to 70% is exported. We try to maximize our sales within Nigeria and then to West Africa, and the surplus we export. So today you can say 60% we are exporting.
60%.
But
And
40%
most
is
of your
volume.
shipment are done break bulk. And I spoke about multimodal. And obviously what we should contemplate with our partners, and as Françoise rightly said, we should have an holistic approach. If we want to reduce the cost of logistics for the farmers, for instance, we should use our equipment, our containers to ship your fertilizers inside the country, close to the farmers. Then we should have this storage facility and load these containers with maize, for instance. And then you divide per two the cost of logistics. So there is a lot to do together, but in order to be able to do that, first, we need a railroad to transport efficiently and with the lowest carbon footprint possible these containers. And we need also storage facilities. And these storage facilities may have a financial return if the market is already almost there. Then we don't need any DFI to make it clear. We could work with our own fund or with private banking. But there are other cases where the state and the DFI have to create a sustainable environment for the farmers. And it is not the job of the private sectors. You know, you did your fertilizer plan because you had the market, you had the vision. So we may have the vision, but if the return is a 10 or 15-year return, it is no more a financial return. It's an economic and social return. And we have to have this holistic approach. Then we spoke about funding. You know, we have the means to transport all these goods. You know, MSC operates more than 3 million containers with 730 vessels. So it's not the issue. The issue is to grant the capacity to the farmers, to allow them to fund. And you know, we are a champion for exporting soft commodities because now it's food. It's not exporting cashew, exporting coffee, beans or cocoa. It's dealing with food. And we have developed a financial tool together with our partners, which is CMA. So as soon as the soft commodities enter into our facility, the bank can grant a warrant and give the fund to the traders or the farmer. So if we would be able to develop this kind of storage facility that we or other company would manage, we would be able to help the farmers to fund themselves as quick as possible. So it's part of a solution. But again, and I truly enjoyed this panel, because Africa should scale up. Yeah. We should change scale and not to move one step after the other. Otherwise, we lose time, we lose opportunity. So we should work concurrently. The private sector should work, but the public sector should work, and the DFI, they should focus on what the private sector cannot do. And the last comment I'll do is, again, the change of scale. Jeremy was right this morning. He said to us, you know, I work in 33 countries with 33 regulations. It's the same for agriculture. We should have common and regional asset premises.
Have you benefited from AFCTA?
No. AFCTA, I will be blunt. You know, there is only one region in Africa where you can clear your goods in the ports for the landlocked country. Is in Ireg. Even here in Abidjan, if you want to ship good to Burkina, to Niger, you can't clear the good in Abidjan. So there is still a lot to do, but I remain positive. The trend is there, but you know, there are many regional areas, but obviously ZLECAf in French is a huge opportunity, but it should happen and not remain in the papers of the deciders. Sorry to be blunt, but we desperately need it, and obviously then it will be a big advantage because, again, Africa is a fragmented market. We are in 47 countries. So, but if we could work under the same region, imagine the size of our investments won't
That's
be
true.
the same.
That's true. Thank you so much. Please don't be sorry to be blunt. We need to be blunt here. And you've pretty much started the third part of the conversation, which is, all right, storage. And that's why I deliberately asked you the question on AFCTA. What has been your storage story, Manish? Have you done storage, and how can we scale storage, for development of the African continent in general?
If I get you correctly, storage.
Yes, storage, yeah.
As a friend earlier said, when we're talking about food grain and agri production, that there should be a huge storage capacity to be created right at the stage of production. And that's what we do in Nigeria. We have created a huge storage capacity, which is more than like 250,000 metric tons.
Okay.
So we are ready to supply any volume which are required during seasonal times in Africa. During 21 and 22, as African continent was facing shortage of fertilizers, we had a lot of interaction with World Bank, IMF, IFC, as well as AFDB. Each of them wanted us to provide a urea to the continent. And each time I said, come to us every time and any time, we'll be able to supply 100 to 200,000 metric tons of urea in a very, very short time. It's only that you have to sort the logistics as well as the financial part of it. We have the ability to supply the total requirement of Africa at any given point of time.
Thank you so much for that.
And we have huge storage created, so there's no need for storage. We supply just in time to the farming season,
Okay.
so that the cost as destination is very low.
Okay.
In our model, we monitor the farm gate prices of urea.
Okay.
So we use a very open transportation system, whereby we allow the transporters, individual, even if he owns one truck, to compete
Okay.
to get the shipment. And thereby we see that we are able to deliver the urea to the farmers at a very, very competitively priced logistic cost.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Munish. I know you'll have questions. I'll take one or two questions at the tail end. We're already running out of time. So if you can be quick on the time, about a minute. Jennifer, what's been your story like with storage challenges of your smallholder farmers and your farmers in general?
Well, for us, like bridging the last mile towards the farmers and off the farm, I liked what you mentioned earlier in terms of we need to have solutions that are also closer to the farmers. We had massive issues and challenges with that. And for us, what is critical is to partner with actors who can actually do provide some of these solutions closer to the farm. That's number one. But number two, what is also important is the connectivity across the value chain. It doesn't just stop immediately after the farm, or not even with some of the primary processors or the traders thereafter. It's basically the entire value chain that is critical. And that's why it's also important for us to work with some of the actors further down the value chain, some of the largest off-takers, processors, and even traders, to see how do we actually improve that connectivity between the farmers and yourself.
Okay. So you might have to meet with Munish too, because he's coming to Senegal soon too, isn't it? He's going around. He's coming to Senegal and other parts of Africa. Coming to you, Francois, how can we, tackle this issue of storage, owing to the fact that we have many challenges like climate change, deforestation like you talked about, and this possibility. And storage is a very big problem across the African continent, and it makes the farmers lose value for their produce.
Yes, regarding storage and more broadly maybe strategic reserves in terms of agriculture, I would say we focus on two things. Financial infrastructure, and we have to finance sustainable infrastructure, both financial infrastructure and physical infrastructures. So regarding financial infrastructure, what we have developed at Proparco, but I think that Sergio will mention it because the trade finance program of IFC is huge. We have developed a trade finance program dedicated to the African continent and mostly to the agricultural commodities, because the demand is really important and is not met today. So I think this is a very interesting tool to help the growth of MSMEs in that sector. And regarding physical infrastructure, I mean, the space is so wide, going from ports, of course, to railways and also rural roads. We do not have to forget rural roads. So the space is very large. I think also that the development of special economic zones is an interesting tool that we are currently exploring because it provides a wide range of services to those players in the agribusiness, providing, raw material procurements, but also logistics, what is missing, operating and maintenance services, and also some hygiene services. So I think it is an interesting avenue to focus.
Thank you so much. Sergio?
I think, look, a lot has been said on this point, so maybe just one point to add, since François very kindly mentioned our trade program, our global trade program. A lot on the development of the value chain is to provide trade finance so that companies, smallholders, companies across the value chain can sell their products, export their products abroad. We have put in place this program a few years ago. It has been really ramping up. With last year, for instance, last fiscal year in IFC, we did $3 billion of trade finance in Africa. This fiscal year, which will finish in a few days, we are set to finish at a higher number. But what was important there is that we've been focusing not just on trade finance, on exports of goods from Africa to outside the continent, but now we're focusing more and more intra-Africa trade. And there you can see there's a very large gap of financing. It's much harder to find a counterparty for a financial institution from one part of Africa to the other. So we've been really developing this program, putting it in place, and I think it's having a very strong impact on the ground.
Thank you very much. Show of hands for questions. Good, very good. Can we get the microphone over to him? Okay, I'll do it myself. Thank you. Your question? Thank you. Another show of hands. We can take one more.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Basically, thank you very much for the interesting conversation and arguments. We heard about fertilizer. We heard about the R&D for this good seed and the financing, and certainly the ultimate logistics support to save the cost of movement. But what about financing the food processors? Because processing the food, after growing it, and to cut waste, is key. I mean, it adds first the processing value to the social life, workforce, et cetera, in the country. But as well, it will add more to the life of the agro product because it's sensitive, and the outreach with logistics, we can actually send it to wider markets if it's processed, preserved, et cetera. So can we talk about food processing?
Very good. Food processing, financing food processing. We still have more questions? Show of hands, questions? Questions? No more question? Going. Okay, gone. Good, yeah.
No, thank you very much. So it's a very good question. Actually, traditionally, this has been the core part of IFC's financing in Africa. It's been, we call ourselves agribusiness, right? We do the food transformation. Because of this point that I was mentioning at the beginning, that our goal is to try and add as much value as possible in country so that we really help the development of the country. I'll give you a very good example we've done in Mali in the shea nut industry. Mali used to export the nuts without any transformation, and so the very small value would stay in the country. So we have helped a processor called Mali Shea, a company who's just processing does the paste, the butter, and then I mean the base of with the shea nut, so that then it can be exported. But what is interesting there is that we didn't do just the food transformation. We put in place an advisory program to help the women who were collecting, and because it's actually an industry that is very labor intensive, and particularly women work on that front. And then we also work with the government and with the company on the certification, because if you want to export goods, you need a certain level of certification depending on the type of industries you are. But on the agricultural products, it's very different if you export a raw product than if you want to export a finished product. So we work with the government and with the industry to promote better standards, so that then they could get, in this case, European certifications, and they could then export directly their products. So I fully support your point. I think it's very important for the development of the continent.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you so much, Philip, for being passionate, for saying it the way it is. Thank you, Manish, for what you've been able to do with transformation in Nigeria. I wish you a lot of luck as you go into Senegal. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, first of all, for your very good work and helping a lot of people in the ecosystem. And thank you, Sergio. And most importantly, thank you so much, Omid, for setting the stage with your very insightful advisory and what we should do, and showing us what the problem is. It's a ticking time bomb on the African continent, and geosecurity of food is really very important. We need to secure food, we need to secure the continent, and we need to secure nutrition, most importantly, for the generation yet. But I thank you all for deciding to spend your evening with us. Thank you for your time, and thank you for taking our time to be with us this evening. Thank you so much. We'll see you very soon, and we see you when you have your business deals going on with these guys and doing great things on the African continent and growing the African continent. Is it possible? Can we grow the continent? Yes. Somebody say, yes, we can. Yes, we can. Okay, yeah. Don't look at me. I'm not Barack Obama. Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice audience.